Hey, friends, welcome back to Midweek Encouragement. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad that you could be here today. And I want to talk to you today about trials. It's something that we all go through. But before we get into that, I want to tell you a story, a true story. Happened several states ago and several years ago. I was at a friend's farm and I was helping them. And we were asked, me and the friend's son were asked to jack up a piece of farm equipment so that we could attach the tractor to it and go and use this particular piece of farm equipment. Being the young kids that we were, we really didn't know how to use this jack, and it was getting very frustrating. And the farmer came over. He slapped that jack under it and jacked it up, no trouble at all. And then I remember the words of Harold, and these words are etched in my mind deeply. He said, "You only have to be smarter than what you're working against." Isn't that weird? Those are some pretty powerful words. You only have to be smarter than what you're working against. And I guess that's true if you're trying to jack up a manure spreader. Yes, John Deere has a manure spreader. It's the only piece of equipment John Deere will not stand behind. Think about it. You might get it later. Newton has a law in physics. Newton's third law of physics says for every action, there is an equal and opposite counteraction. For me, I believe that our reaction to the things of life, the situations of life, the things that hit us broadside that we're not ready for, they reveal the relationship we have with our Redeemer. Your reaction reveals your relationship with the Redeemer. Today, we are in the middle of Holy Week, beautiful time of the year. It's an exciting time of year when we think about what this week symbolizes and what this week means. It's a time to set aside to remember the last week of the life of Jesus, going all the way up through the resurrection, which we will celebrate on Sunday. And because of his death on the cross and his arising from the grave, we have a reason to celebrate. If you remember from December, I like nativities. I like having a nativity set up year-round in my house. I'm excited about a new nativity set that I was given. A lady in the church has crocheted a nativity set, and it's got a carrying bag, and I am just so excited to get to use it. And I'm constantly thinking, okay, how can I use it now? How can I use it now? I think I could tell this story year-round because it's an exciting story to think that Jesus was born in Nazareth, and he came, he grew up, and he became the Savior of the world. But when I think of my nativity set, and I think about this week of Holy Week, I think about the crucifixion and all, the resurrection, I begin to wonder, why don't we have a Holy Week set? Or would we call it a resurrection set? Maybe a crucifixion set? I think the reason that we don't have them is because death is kind of wonky. If we had anything that we set out this time of year and put it on display, what would it look like? What would we call it? Would there be parts of the nativity scene that we could borrow from to put into this one? Oh, of course, the donkey. Yeah, he rode into town on the donkey. But I think we need to focus on something about this particular story more than anything. Maybe the decoration that we ought to have for the resurrection week would be an empty box, something that is empty. Because I receive hope when I see the empty tomb. When everyone came to the tomb of Jesus, they saw the grave coverings that were on Jesus, and they were folded up. In many places, if you go to visit and you are given a meal and there's a cloth napkin, the appropriate thing to do is to fold it and lay it back on the table, because that says, I plan to come back to this place sometime. I would like to come back to this place. Jesus folded up the grave clothes and said, I'll be back. He didn't literally say that, but his action said, I'll be back. And the empty tomb gives me hope in the promise that he will return. When I think of Jesus' last week and the different things that he experienced a number of trials that week. Not just the one where he stood in front of the governor and they judged him and they planned to crucify him because of that. But he really did go through a lot of difficult times. The day after he rode into town on the donkey, he is found in the temple. He's turning over the tables and he's saying, my Father's house shall be a house of prayer. Then he goes and he's having a meal, and this woman is pouring very expensive perfume on his feet and wiping his feet. And the disciples are challenging him as to why wasn't this money used for something else? He has a follower that betrays him. He has another follower that denies him. He is beaten and humiliated by the Roman soldiers, and even more. And all of this time, Jesus has the power That he could have stopped it at any moment. He could have said, enough is enough, and what you're doing to me, I'm going to do back to you, and boom, they would have been on the ground. But that's not what he does. Friedrich Nietzsche said that that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. James, the half-brother of Jesus, said these words, and I think these words are for us today. He says in James chapter 1, starting at verse 2, consider it a pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may become mature and complete, not lacking anything. Jesus set the example for us, yet the question remains, how do you respond to difficult times? I think sometimes we need to be smarter than what we're working against, and when we're not, we need to go to somebody who might be. James tells us a few things. First of all, if you go back to verse 1, one of the last words of verse 1 says, greetings. And this isn't saying, hello, hi, how are you? No, he's saying this is something greater than that. He's saying, greeting. This is more than just hello. It's a meaning to rejoice and be glad. This is not a suggestion. It's a command. Rejoice and be glad. It is as if he's saying, be happy with where you are. God has placed you there to bloom, and you need to bloom where you are planted, because how you handle the storm is going to be a witness and a testimony to those that are near to you. Your reaction in the storm is going to reveal your relationship to the Redeemer. Don't allow yourself to become unraveled. James also speaks to those who are in troubling times. He wants us to see that we are not the only ones in a mess. So we need to keep in mind, this mess can become the message Jesus Christ wants you to deliver for him to someone else. He isn't saying keep a chin up, but to keep your eyes up. As the writer of Hebrews says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And right there in Hebrews 12, it goes on to say, you haven't suffered anything like Jesus has. James could also say, count it joy. And we may feel, well, what does he know? He's not in the storm that I'm in. James agrees with Jesus saying to expect the storms. And James adds, count it a joy because of what it is producing. I think it's more than just perseverance that it's producing. I think it gives God the opportunity to show that he is God. Are you familiar with the words of Paul the Apostle when he wrote in Romans 8:28? I think this is one of those verses that you ought to write down and stick on the mirror of the bathroom. It says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to this purpose, or his purpose. James doesn't say have a little joy, but have all joy. Joy that isn't a pity party or feel sorry for me. We don't go through trials alone. Jesus doesn't just part company with us. He doesn't send us through the trial. He goes through it with us. And we don't need to put it on Facebook and see how many people will reply saying, hey, I'm praying for you, or they'll click the like button or whatever. It's a different response. We're to go directly to some friends and get them to pray with us. We don't need masses. We just need 2 or 3. Because the Bible tells us if 2 or 3 agree here on earth, it'll be done for them in heaven. Moses didn't put out a mass appeal. Moses didn't get on the Facebook and say, hey, I need a few people to hold my hands up while we go into battle here. No, he just needed 2, Aaron and Hur. And they held his hands up during the battle. And as long as his hands were in the air, the Israelites were victorious in battle. So think about who you're going to. Our trials are opportunities to rejoice and be content. Rejoice you have Jesus and others walking with you. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety upon him because he cares for you. Those last 5 words are powerful. Because he cares for you. To rejoice sometimes requires us to step back and get a bigger view of what's going on. And because when we step back in the middle of our mess, we can see the Messiah in the middle. Our nativities have Jesus in the manger. Mary and Joseph were to name him Emmanuel, which means God with us. The empty tomb was necessary so that we could receive the Holy Spirit, and God is still with us. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. That is his promise, and we can take it to the bank. Our joy in the trial is that Jesus is still with us. In the difficult last days of the life of Jesus, he wasn't thinking about himself. He had you in mind, had me in mind. And one of the purposes of trials is for us to get to know Jesus better. We don't need to know more about Jesus or more about God. We need to get to know him intimately. Have you ever been in a store and heard a child going, "Mom, Mom"? As a ventriloquist, I kind of like to go around doing that just to drive people crazy. But when you hear a child's voice going, "Mom, Mom," you can always tell if it's your child, because this child, that voice has been with you since the day that you gave birth to them. You recognize their voice. As we face trials, I think we need to get used to the voice of God speaking to us. And we get used to his voice by reading and listening to his voice. The only way to recognize his voice is to spend time with him as he speaks. He speaks through his word. He speaks through a still small voice. He speaks through other godly people. And when we recall what he has said and we recall his promises, then we're able to hear his voice. He has said, "Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world." So your reaction to the things that are going on around you reveals your relationship to the Redeemer. He hasn't moved. Start stepping in his direction. Your trial? Yeah, you just got to be smarter than what you're working against and go to the one who knows it all, who loves you with a perfect and everlasting love, who will not give up on you. He is for you. He is with you. He is not against you. He is only against the sin that we involve ourselves in. But the good news is he is faithful and just and is willing to forgive us of all unrighteousness. That is how much he loves you. So your reaction, it reveals your relationship. How's that relationship going? Thanks for watching today. Bye-bye.